Hey, all you literary legends and luminaries. I'm Julie and welcome to another episode of Booksmart. Today's book deals with one of my favorite topics, pop culture. But it's a serious take on pop culture and women. It's called Girl on Girl, How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves by Sophie Gilbert. Gilbert focuses on the very late 1990s into the 2000s and how these times influenced where we are today. She looks at music, reality TV, movies, and concepts like Girl Boss and the MeToo movement and really showcases the paradox of the changing trends and how women are damned if they do and damned if they don't. I found it all incredibly fascinating. I've got to start with what Gilbert wrote at the end of her introduction. She lets us know that her book is just a slice of the issue, and part of her research led her to the pornish title of her book, Girl on Girl, as pornography trends seem to encapsulate so much of pop culture and society. This is her last sentence of her introduction, and I quote, "Analyzing history together is above all an expression of hope. We try to understand all the ways in which things went wrong so that we can conceive of a more powerful way forward." Such an eloquent way to express her purpose. I have to say, I really enjoyed her writing style and her voice. Gilbert opens up with the music of the 1990s, how women in rock were replaced with teenage girls, and she is so on point. I love Sarah McLachlan and Jewel, and of course Madonna. There was Alanis Morissette, Sean Colvin, Paula Cole, Jan Arden, Meredith Brooks, and then they're just gone, quickly phased out by 1999. Even Madonna started getting less radio play. I don't turn off my Sirius station if they're playing Oops, I Did It Again or Genie in the Bottle or Spice Girls Wannabe, but none of those songs made it into my 90s playlist. I was in my last years of college when all those teeny bopper girls took over pop music, so maybe that's why I preferred Building a Mystery or Sunny Came Home. Gilbert states that the teenage girl music boom replacing the likes of Sarah was because record companies could control such young girls, but better yet, they could sell a whole bunch more stuff, and we're not talking about records. The Spice Girls turned girl power into a marketing ploy to sell stuff. So let me read you this. And if you are of my generation, or even a little bit younger, you might realize this. The Spice Girls version of girl power, she wrote, was constructed in such a way as to neutralize feminism, to loudly and deliberately replace it with a more modern alternative, and to make no indication that this alternative was a model for social or political change. Taft interpreted girl power as having four distinct tenets: anti-feminism, post-feminism, individual power, and consumer power. The relentlessness, positivity of its content, the idea that women could achieve anything as long as they were willing to present themselves the right way and hustle, anticipated the girl boss moment of the 2010s and was just as myopic regarding structural inequalities in society. But girl power was irresistible. You can be a leader. You can be strong. You can be confident. An ad for Space Camp Barbie read in 1999, capturing the mood. Girls can do it all. Girl power was almost instantly appropriated by brands who saw it in a powerful new consumer demographic. The December 1997 issue of Fortune, Taft noted, contained a 6-page spread on girl power and marketing, which explained that 88% of girls between 13 and 17 just love to shop. For millennial girls, buying things was suddenly being presented as a political act, one that negated the need for other kinds of activism. Wow, is all I have to say to that. So record labels were very concerned with that activism about hip-hop's violent lyrics toward the government and police, but not toward violence of women. I'm not going to read the excerpted lyrics that Gilbert's quotes because they're awful and have literally no redeeming value whatsoever. But this is what Gilbert concludes, and I quote, "These were lyrics that record labels had actively condoned, preferring sexually violent imagery against women to more combustible language directed at state or the police." Why is that okay? And I know those lyrics are still out there because my students listen to some of the filthiest music I've ever heard. It's horrible. Yet it's socially sanctioned music, and it sells or has thousands of views on YouTube. Gilbert develops sex and porn and uses descriptions of scenes from American Pie with how women are depicted. She writes a lot about the romantic comedies and how they've changed, or not changed sometimes, but she quotes a line from Ali Sheedy in The Breakfast Club, a line that sums up so much of what women deal with in regards to sex. "If you say you haven't, you're a prude. If you say you have, you're a slut. It's a trap. You want to, but you can't, and when you don't, you wish you didn't, right?" That about covers it. And The Breakfast Club came out in 1985. The way women are portrayed in the media, I think this is still partially true 40 years later. It's a trap. Gilbert covers reality TV, which not only deals with how women are portrayed behaviorally, but also aesthetically. How our ideals of beauty morph to match what we are being bombarded with by two rich women who don't have a whole lot to do with their time. This also connects back to the teenage pop stars, how these reality TV women are always selling us something. They are savvy businesswomen, and certified celebrities have jumped on the reality TV and the branding train. The line of reality TV and social media blur because in a way, reality TV gave us this idea of watching people do not much of anything, yet we are completely captivated by such nothingness. So let me read you this. The cultural fascination with seeing people perform their lives for entertainment was soaring. It would influence how women looked, how they related to one another, how they ate and spent money and defined their ambitions and raised their children. All because there was something so thrilling about seeing the imperfect dynamics of real life transformed by cameras into media spectacle. From its very earliest days, reality television as a genre has been defined by two almost chaotically oppositional impulses: a desire to examine humans through a sociological lens, and the more crucial imperative to make money. Once again, it comes back to money. And this is a great segue into confessional writing, or what today we would call blogging or memoir writing. These were blossoming during this time period. Gilbert tells the story of Marie Calloway, who published online a piece called Adrian Brody about her interactions, many of them sexual, with an older guy. So let me read to you what Gilbert has assessed about the response from this incident. When you see Calloway's pieces gathered together, you recognize what this young woman has been doing, what her plan has been from the beginning, which she has executed without error right to the end, Stephen Marsh wrote in Esquire. She has been submitting herself to horrific sexual experiences in order to write about them. I'm not sure that this is entirely true. Calloway's writing reads to me now as a part of a more radical canon that simply wanted more honesty in art, a stringently true account of what young women were feeling and thinking. In her subsequent book, What Purpose Did I Serve in Your Life?, she wrote about sex work, losing her virginity, and the men who wrote expressing fantasies about hurting her. Then, after drawing an extreme amount of attention, much of it brutal, she disappeared. It's hard for me not to compare her with Jennifer Ringling, another woman who seemed fascinated by the art and historical significance of her own self-exposure until she realized how little it was giving her in return. So let's talk about this self-exposure for a second. I think the lines between memoir and social media blur as well. I believe that social media has become the thing where people simply do things just so that they can post about them. Gilbert doesn't really address this issue in her book, but isn't that why Venice has had to curb their tourism? Why those charming Notting Hill homes are being repainted? Their delightful little row of colorful houses are now black so that people stop posting selfies and videos? People, and it is just people, not just women, are traveling and eating and getting plastic surgery because it's trending. They flock to these places and things and behaviors. They're doing things simply to be able to post about it. Gilbert writes a lot about HBO's series Girls, both in relation to beauty standards and writing experiences. Hannah in Girls is encouraged to do things just so she can write about them. But I really want to spend some time on the next issue that connects to this whole writing about our experiences, the difference between men and women writing about their experiences, because Gilbert develops this issue beautifully. So Nora Ephron wrote a fictionalized account of her husband's infidelity into a book called Heartburn. She was slaughtered in the media for it. So here's what Gilbert writes about this and what it says. It's significant, I think, how often people interpret the narrativizing of an unfamiliar perspective as a threat. Men who write about their lives tend to be canonized as brave of the human experience. Women who do the same are guilty of oversharing. Or, as Ephron put it in 2004, Philip Roth and John Updike picked away at the carcasses of their early marriages in book after book, but to the best of my knowledge, they were never hit with the thinly disguised thing. Oversharing. Why aren't men guilty of oversharing? To summarize it even more clearly, Gilbert asked this question, and I quote, "Why is male honesty in art seen as brave while female honesty is so repellent? That is the million-dollar question." Gilbert brings up the criticism Taylor Swift receives for writing about past relationships, but no one cared when Bob Dylan did it. This you see time and time again, and it's so infuriating. If you remember the Booksmart episode I did on Ambition Monster by Jennifer Romolini, well, she wrote about the problem with the girl boss movement. And here's how Gilbert writes about the girl boss movement. And you know I just love when books I read seem to kind of communicate back and forth with each other, even though, I had no idea that they did. But the girl boss was also cursed from the start because she was essentially a figurehead, as much a branding tool as Mr. Muscle or Tony the Tiger. For much of the 2010s, feminism was chic, and the empowering symbol of a woman succeeding in business was the ultimate key to media attention, good PR, and most crucially, juiced up sales. If these women could succeed while upholding feminist values and treating their employees humanely, Amanda Mull wrote in The Atlantic in 2020, then maybe the patriarchy was just a choice that savvy consumers could shop their way around. Maybe people could vote for equality by buying a particular set of luggage or joining a particular co-working space. That many female entrepreneurs were getting rich off items that capitalized on toxic beauty standards or environmentally poisonous fast fashion was less of an issue than was the revelation that many girl bosses operated just like men. They weren't interested in the elevation of other women at all. Such scamminess, as Gilbert refers to the girl boss movement. So let's talk about women and politics. I know. I try to avoid politics at all costs, but Gilbert hits on the conundrum women in politics face. Gilbert describes Hillary Clinton's run for president as well as Sarah Palin's run with John McCain as his vice president. So first, let me read you this in regards to how it kind of comes together. Ever since, women running for offices have tended to fall into the same traps that Clinton and Palin stumbled into. If candidates downplay their appearances and their ability to be read as sexual objects, they're met with disgust. If they groom themselves according to the uncanny aesthetic standards of the conservative media ecosystem, they undermine themselves and their ability to be taken seriously. And literally right now, we have many women in politics being critiqued for their appearance, like Ice Barbie. So let me read you this because it's very fascinating how everything kind of connects together. It's no coincidence that so many conservative women these days bear remarkable aesthetic similarities to reality TV stars, with glam preeminent above all else and the dominant mode of self-presentation seeming so unnatural it hardly reads as human. Still, the requirement that women on the right conform to highly feminine sexualized standards of dress is also the logical outcome of an ideology that prizes women as wives and mothers above all else. To look any other way is to instantly diminish your own value. The overarching message is the same as it was in popular culture 25 years ago. Power is sex, and sex is power. That the power in question isn't real is exactly the point. So chew on that for a while. But on a side note, why aren't men's appearances criticized as much? Why aren't articles and forums started about what political men look like? It's just a question. And, Bill Clinton didn't suffer any consequences from the whole Monica Lewinsky thing, but she was assaulted in the media, not to mention what Linda Tripp went through. But anyway, so I've read The Handmaid's Tale years ago, and then I watched the show as well, and I had read the book long before the show came out, and I am one of those people who see the parallels between the U.S. right now and Gilead. And I'm just scratching my head wondering how it was that I had more rights in my 20s than I do right now. But Gilbert shed lights on this, and it's a fascinating idea. And I never in a million years would have really kind of connected all these thoughts and put them together. So here we go. The MeToo movement was enormously influential. The New York Times calculated a year later that more than 200 powerful men had lost their jobs as a result, around half of whom were replaced by women. But it was also immediately divisive. Virtually before ink had dried on the print edition of the first Weinstein expose, people wondered aloud whether MeToo had gone too far. Critics seemed to sense something retributive about it, as though it were all just a big overreaction to the fact that Donald Trump was president. And in a way, they were right. The fact that voters had elected a man credibly accused by dozens of women of sexual assault and later found liable in court for the sexual abuse and defamation of E. Jean Carroll added a real sense of urgency to the effort of exposing men who were abusing their power. And this, I suppose, is why recent history has often felt so whiplash-inducing. After the election of Trump came the corrective efforts of MeToo, which were followed in turn by the dismantling in the United States of women's reproductive choice as a constitutional right. If fear and loathing of feminism is a sort of perpetual viral condition in our culture, it is not always in an acute stage. Its symptoms subside and resurface periodically. Susan Faludi wrote in Backlash more than 30 years ago, "If," she adds, "we trace these occurrences in American history, we find such flare-ups are hardly random. They have always been triggered by the perception, accurate or not, that women are making great strides." Doesn't it make more sense now? But it's chilling. It is so incredibly chilling. With every stride we gain, we are put back in our places with something else. The last section I'm going to read to you is sort of a summary of Gilbert's ideas, just because I want you to see what she writes about, because I only covered just a handful, and she really does deal with a lot of issues. And I really struggled to figure out which pieces to read because I had so many little kitty cats marked. It's no longer at all surprising to me that a capable and experienced woman lost to a reality TV character. And she's talking about the election in 2016 and then also 2024. Every single cultural message Americans had absorbed during the decades leading up to the first race was enshrining the idea that women fundamentally lack the qualities required to gain and exercise authority, intelligence, morality, dignity. It's worth noting here that men don't have to meet all these barriers to entry because they have always been powerful and thus have nothing to prove. At the same time, any women who managed to accumulate cultural power for themselves were rapidly undermined or replaced altogether. In music during the 1990s, women who railed against the system were switched out with girls who could be more easily packaged and sold. In fashion that same decade, Amazonian supermodels with power and self-possession were edged out by vulnerable, hunched, more easily exploited teenagers. On film throughout the aughts, female characters were presented as ancillary objects, shrewish and vacuous at very best. And the new medium of reality television, virtually from its inception, propagated the idea that women were hysterical, money-grubbing idiots scratching each other's eyes out for a prize none of them seemed to even want. The world of shows, such as The Bachelor and Flavor of Love, was one where women's only form of power was sexual, and where, as the media literacy educator Jennifer L. Ponzer once told me, women not only appeared to not have any choices, but appeared not to want to have choices. Later, as reality TV celebrity became a more reliable and lucrative career path, a hothouse of proto-influencers selling us things, it set the model for how modern women were supposed to make themselves over and present themselves to the world, the success of which mattered infinitely more than that of any other aspirations they might have. We each of us have decades of internal wiring informed by the works we grew up with, and so we need to expand our conception of what power for women looks like. We need to rewrite the archetypes and the narratives all the way down to the bones. And in many ways, this rewriting is already happening. Yes, Gilbert does a fabulous job covering such a complex topic and does so in such a compelling way. I found her writing style a joy to read. Does Gilbert cover all the issues thoroughly? No, of course she can't, and she couldn't, and she tells us that at the beginning. Gilbert doesn't always pull from pop culture what I might have, but that's okay too. The points she makes are clearly supported from the examples she does bring up. My only complaint with the book is that she didn't develop much about how women have turned against each other. She brings it up a few times in relation to other points, and perhaps the reason we turn on each other is simply a product of the fact that we've turned on ourselves. Girl on Girl is the book everyone needs to read right now. If I had to name a book of the year that is a must-read, Girl on Girl is that book, the must-read of 2025. The girl boss, the girl power, the stay-at-home mom, the 20-something, and the 40-something, you will see yourself in so many ways, and you'll have a better understanding of the damage that has been done years ago through pop culture, and how seemingly innocent pop culture trends maybe have more of an impact on our lives than you think, especially when men are the ones who don't have to earn their power. You might even make some different decisions moving forward, like not buying certain products or not following social media trends, or even not partaking in Ice Barbie comments in relation to appearance, or not laughing at Amber Heard's divorce trial. Awareness brings compassion, and with compassion comes empathy. Maybe an all-girl alliance will work more often on Survivor. Who knows? Gilbert paints a clear picture, a very grim picture, of a woman's path in life, from career, beauty, expectations, and oh, so many obstacles. Yet Gilbert offers hope that if we understand why society is functioning as it is, we can combat it. And if we can combat that, we can change it. Thanks for watching. As always, my goal at Booksmart is to get a little bit smarter, one book at a time.
So tell me what you want.